A Russian drone has struck the protective shell of a nuclear reactor at the Chernobyl power plant.
Former Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba says Europe must speak up and protect its interest in an exclusive interview with Euronews. Dresden holds commemorative events to mark the 80th anniversary of the Allied forces' bombing of the city in the Second World War.
Nationwide protests have erupted in Belgium against the new government's economic policies.
A Russian drone with a high explosive warhead has struck the protective shell of Chernobyl's nuclear reactor, according to Ukrainian authorities. President Zelensky says the Kyiv region was attacked overnight and the drone hit the safe confinement of the destroyed fourth reactor unit of the nuclear power plant. He added, however, that although the confinement sustained significant damage, the fire was extinguished and radiation levels have not increased. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has brought repeated warnings of dangers to Ukraine's 4 nuclear plants, especially at the Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia plant in southern Ukraine. Rafael Grossi, head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, said the strike on Chernobyl and military activity near the Zaporizhzhia plant have left the UN agency on high alert.
The US Secretary of Defense has called restoring Ukraine's pre-2014 borders unrealistic and ruled out the country's NATO membership. Former Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba says Ukraine must now focus on what remains on the table.
Overall, Russia is interested in 3 topics: land, NATO and money. And now we see that land and NATO are already gone without any fight. Of course, Ukraine will continue to insist on it, but this US position has been set more than squarely. So what stays on the table is money, and that will be about sanctions, about frozen Russian assets, and the new element added to it is this raw material agreement that Trump wants to sign with Ukraine.
President Zelensky doubts Europe can fill the gap if US support fades. Ahead of the annual Munich Security Conference, Kuleba says the ball is now in Europe's court.
So high expectations, but I don't think there will be anything new. What coming from the US side? What I think could happen is whether Europe is going to speak up. But Europe has been silent so far. And it has to give its voice. It has to say what is happening, what is its view on this. Because basically, everything that Trump said and did so far did not only not match Ukrainian interests, but also European interests.
Ukraine wants NATO membership, but instead there are suggestions of different security guarantees, such as European peacekeepers. Kuleba believes that to be unrealistic.
3,000 kilometers of the front line. 3,000 kilometers. Zelensky said at least 200,000 troops are needed, and he's very humble in his assessment. That means that all the entire armed force of the entire European Union will have to go through the peacekeeping operation. Because if you deploy 200,000 to the line, it means that you need to have at least 200,000 at home resting and preparing for the rotation. The cost of this mission is uncountable. I mean, I cannot even count how much it is going to cost. And listen, if you have all that money that you are ready to invest in peacekeepers, it will be much cheaper to give them to Ukraine to allow it to build up its own army and fight the Russians without exposing the lives of EU soldiers to the threat of being caught up in fire.
Less than 3 weeks from the 3-year mark of Russia's full-scale invasion, Donald Trump is pushing for negotiations. The terms, however, remain unclear.
The German city of Dresden marked the 80th anniversary of the Allied bombing in World War II with various commemorative events. On the 13th of February 1945, Allied forces conducted a 3-day aerial raid of the city, which destroyed large parts of it. Firestorms also swept through the city center, adding to the misery. As many as 25,000 people were killed in the bombing campaign, and the pain is still felt to this day.
Meine Oma, die war zu dem Zeitpunkt 10 und die hat im Bollerwagen ihre kleine Schwester durch diesen Feuersturm gezogen. Die hat so viel erzählt von damals.
The annual event carries significant importance to not only Dresdeners, but also Germans from other cities.
Warte mal hier, wir sind eigentlich ja aus Berlin, aber wir kommen jedes Jahr hierher und findet sehr, sehr gut, dass so viele Leute hier sind. Und wir dürfen das nicht vergessen, was hier passiert ist.
Prince Edward of the British royal family attended the event in representation of the king. He participated in the events and spoke of the grief still felt at the terrible destruction and loss of life. He also visited the Dresden Frauenkirche during his stay, an iconic church in the city which was completely destroyed during the bombing. The church, which was rebuilt and opened in 2005, remained in ruins for decades and served as a reminder of the Allies' aggression.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance arrived in Germany on Thursday, where he is to hold critical talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference. Upon his arrival, he first visited the Dachau concentration camp memorial site, a powerful symbol of World War II. Together with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Vance and Zelensky are set to discuss President Donald Trump's intensifying push for Ukraine and Russia to begin negotiations to end the war. In addition to his talks with Zelensky, Vance is delivering an address to the conference on Friday.
Serbian students from several cities are marching over the course of 4 days to join at a 15th of February protest in the central town of Kragujevac. The demonstrations, led by university students, demand accountability and justice for the deaths of 15 people in the train station awning collapse last November. One student tells us why he is marching.
Idemo da odbranimo Ustav I šetamo za slobodu Srbije.
Weeks-long protests forced the resignation of Serbia's Prime Minister Milos Vučević and further concessions from authorities. However, students do not believe their demands have been fully met. In January, students went on an 80-kilometer march from Belgrade to the northern city of Novi Sad.
U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth denied that the U.S. is betraying Ukraine, following comments that Ukraine should not join NATO and that it's up to Europe to protect itself and Ukraine from Russian aggression. Ahead of a meeting with NATO allies in Brussels on Thursday, he reiterated his call that Ukraine should prepare for a negotiated peace settlement and abandon hope to gain back all its territory from Russia.
There is no betrayal there. There is a recognition that the whole world and the United States is invested and interested in peace, a negotiated peace. As President Trump has said, stopping the killing. And so that will require both sides recognizing things they don't want to.
In response to the announcement from the Trump administration, NATO chief Mark Rutte urged the group's European allies to significantly wrap up their own defense spending.
We have to ramp up defense spending because we know we cannot protect ourselves 4 or 5 years from now if we don't. And also we need to ramp up defense spending because it is clear that the US rightly requires us to do more here on the European side and the Canadian side of NATO. It's only fair, it's only sensible.
Rutte and several other NATO allies are insisting that Ukraine and Europe must not be cut out of any peace negotiations, after Trump signaled that he would hold face-to-face talks soon with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
People in Kyiv have reacted to the US President Donald Trump asking Russian President Vladimir Putin to begin negotiations on ending the war in Ukraine without commitment to Ukraine's participation in the talks.
Тобто це було питання, коли ми опинимось в таких обставинах. Це ось за всі ці 12 років, це вперше, коли про Україну без України.
Я розочарована Трампом, то, що він говорить, що він буде зустрічатися з Путіним, і це все буде відбуватися без України. Тобто вони вирішують нашу долю із Путіним, завдяки якому в нашій країні стільки людей втрачено, найкращих людей. Ну, настрій трошки такий, ну не трошки, а зовсім, скажімо так, негативний. І дуже сумно з цього приводу.
Я просто обурений до глибини душі. Коротко, якщо прокоментувати це все, то я згадаю словам моєї бабусі. Ворон ворону око не виклює. Це на третьому році війни так здавати Україну, я вважаю, що це просто величезне приниження, перш за все, для великого американського народу. Як вони його вибрали, не розумію.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, meanwhile, said he will not accept any negotiations about Ukraine that do not include his country in the talks. European governments also demanded a seat at the table.